All right, it's live. Great, guys. We're live, so it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
And you guys can record it on your end, Kathleen, and you can record it as well. To the cloud, of course.
I'm recording mine to my computer, or should I do it to the cloud?
To the cloud. It's going to eat up all your memory.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for. One more minute. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lenora, Dr. Lenora Helm Hammonds, officially, from North Carolina Central University's Teaching Artist Certificate Program. I am so happy you are joining us today. We have a fantastic panel. I want to also introduce my cohort and co-host, Kathleen Collier from North Carolina Arts Council. Say hello.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, I think we can move ahead. I just wanted to welcome you and let everyone know what we're up to today. We are connecting teaching artists and arts administrators to discuss professional development. Just a little bit of housekeeping as we go forward. It would be really great to get your questions in the chat, but we do request that you don't have your own private conversations in the chat with other viewers so that we can keep our focus on what the panelists are saying and listen to them, the same as if we were all in the same room and wouldn't have side conversations. Just a little bit of Zoom etiquette, right? Have to know that these days. We thank you for being here. North Carolina Central University's Teaching Artist Certificate Program is happy to be in partnership with North Carolina Arts Council to have this event for you today. Some of us are logging on from Facebook's, the North Carolina Arts Council Facebook, the page from their own website, and from our YouTube channel for the North Carolina Teaching Artist Certificate Program. So make sure whatever you say, you're happy for all those people to hear it and see it. Okay, Kathleen?
Yes, and again, as Lenora mentioned, feel free to enter any questions, participants in the chat. We'll try to get to those throughout the today's webinar. And today's webinar will be focusing on two topics. So we're going to spend the first half discussing teaching artist rosters. What are they? What are some helpful things to keep in mind if you're interested in applying for a roster? Second half, we'll focus in on community partnerships for after-school arts education programs and how they can look like a variety of different ways and what makes for a strong and robust partnership. So without further ado, Lenora, I'll let you go ahead and introduce our guest panelists, and then we can get started with our questions.
Beautiful. I am going in no particular order of wonderfulness or greatness, but I'll start with Sarah Bussman. If I'm saying your name incorrectly, please let me know too also. Sarah Bussman is the Arts Education Manager for the Arts Council of Fayetteville in Cumberland County. Her primary initiatives are Artists in Schools, mini grants, and the Municipal Arts Allocation. Prior to working at the Arts Council, Sarah taught in the music department of the University of North Carolina at Pembroke for almost 10 years. She continues to serve as the principal flutist of the Fayetteville Symphony. Sarah is the founder of Dark Water Festival, which celebrates women in music through scholarship, performance, and new music. She lives in Fayetteville, North Carolina with her husband, two little boys, Arthur and Simon, and her puppy, Wally. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Next, we have Cherilyn Napieu. Thank you for that phonetic spelling and enunciation of your name. Cherilyn brings arts together brings Arts Together wealth of experience. So she is the executive director of Arts Together, hailing from Denver, Colorado. Cherilyn brings Arts Together a wealth of experience in development, executive leadership, and nonprofit management. Her background includes the arts, education, and alumni relations at the university level. Prior to joining Arts Together, Cherilyn served as Director of Alumni Engagement for Up With People, an international gap year touring performance program for young adults. What a great idea. She has held previous roles at Up With People, including as a performer herself. In addition, Cherilyn taught at Metropolitan State University of Denver as an affiliate professor in the Nonprofit Management Program, School of Professional Studies. Known as an entrepreneurial leader and community advocate, she has received numerous acknowledgments and awards for her leadership, including Woman of the Millennium by the Colorado Black Roundtable and the Salute to Black Women Award. Cherilyn holds a BS in Nonprofit Organizational Administration from MSU Denver and a Master's of Nonprofit Management from Regis University. Passionate about social justice, she enjoys singing, traveling, serving the community, experimenting in the kitchen, and spending time with her husband and teenage son. Ladies and gentlemen, please say hello to Cherilyn Napieu.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Deborah Shepard. Deborah J. Shepard is the founder and executive director of Heartoscope. A very interesting way you write that. Heartoscope. Deborah holds degrees in psychology and sociology and is a certified therapeutic art life coach. Her career as a speaker and advocate for victims of trauma spans over 10 years. Deborah is a firm believer that art can be used as a tool for healing and is a key component to helping communities grow socially and economically. Deborah advocates for equity in arts and the use of art to heal from trauma. She does this through her newly founded nonprofit called Heartoscope, in which they use art and art culture to improve the quality of underserved communities. Underserved communities are plagued with poverty, trauma, and alienation, and Deborah understands that art is a tool that has been used as a component of recovery from traumatic stress and to reassert a sense of hope that is needed in these communities. Heartoscope offers free art programs and services that foster healing, education, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Deborah Shepard. Oh, I didn't finish. Of course, this fantastic woman has even more for us to share. Pardon me. Deborah's also a writer, known for authoring Good Secrets, Bad Secrets, a children's book that educates children on the importance of speaking out when exposed to harmful situations. Deborah is also known for writing and directing I Wish You Knew, a short film PSA that exposes hidden student trauma. Hold on one second.
Lenora, you're on mute.
Thank you. Deborah is also known for writing and directing I Wish You Knew, a short film PSA that exposes hidden student trauma. When not doing Heartoscope's business, Deborah visits schools and consults with staff on how to make their schools more trauma-informed. Deborah was recently appointed to the Juvenile Justice Planning Committee by Governor Roy Cooper. Yes. Deborah also enjoys raising her 10-year-old son, Drew. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Deborah Shepard. Cecilia Smith. Cecilia Smith, I can boast, is one of the teaching artist instructors in the Teaching Artist Certificate Program here at NCCU. Teaching artist Cecilia Smith is one of the leading vibraphonists of four-mallet technique and performs nationally and abroad. Cecilia is an avid composer, arranger, and multimedia artist. Cecilia has won many commissions and grants, including the Elizabeth Swados Award, specifically for music teaching artists. Cecilia is a teaching artist for several New York City nonprofit arts organizations and human services agencies, including AHRC in New York City, United Cerebral Palsy, aka ADAPT, Institute for Community Living, MICA Population, the NYC, the New York City Housing Authority, Marquis Studio Teaching Artists Institute, Blythedale Children's Hospital, FEGS, LifeSpire, PS37R, the David Marquis School for the Arts, a New York City public school that specifically serves children on the autism spectrum. Cecilia is a recent SU CASA grant awardee. She worked as a teaching artist for Hospital Audiences Incorporated for many years. As a jazz artist, Cecilia has recorded or performed with several renowned artists, including Gary Bartz, Greg Osby, Cassandra Wilson, Milt Hinton, Randy Weston, Marian McPartland, Piano Jazz, NPR station, Donald Harrison, Billy Pierce, Milgrew Miller, Cecil Bridgewater, and others. She has recorded, I believe, 7 now, internationally and nationally released recordings. She is the artistic director of the Mary Lou Williams Resurgence Project, which has been presented throughout the U.S., including the Kennedy Center. Cecilia has also received 2 National Endowment for the Arts NEA Awards, American Masterpiece Award, the Big Read Award. Her most recent grants are through Chamber Music America. Cecilia received a Joyce Award commission for her multimedia work, and this work has been featured in a TEDx talk. Her TEDx talk includes an education component specifically geared to challenged teenagers. Cecilia is a graduate and former faculty member of Berklee College of Music. She currently lives in the Park Slope section of Brooklyn, New York, and I happen to know that her new album, the Mary Lou Williams Resurgent Project, is in the top 5 of jazz albums in the country as we speak today. Welcome, Cecilia Smith. And last but not least, well, this is such a long bio, but he is certainly worth the extra minutes. I grabbed it. He didn't give this to me, so you won't think that he's not, he's a very humble cat, but he's very talented with a wide breadth of experience that he brings to us today. Al Strong, raised in the city that created go-go music, carries an affinity for dance music that is apparent in his sound. Long before Al Strong chose the trumpet, his grandparents laid the musical foundation in their Washington, D.C. An only child raised by his grandparents, music became an integral part of his upbringing. Strong's earliest memories date back to his grandmother's weekly in-home church services, where she would play gospel hymns on the organ. His grandfather took a more secular approach to music listening, introducing him to the likes of Ray Charles, Jimmy Smith, and Donald Byrd during car rides, specifically longer rides that involved fishing trips. Hearing these different genres, Strong took a keen interest in understanding how instruments could generate a particular sound. In turn, he spent much of his childhood trying to replicate the music he heard, reproducing the sounds with whatever household items he could get his hands on. Growing up in D.C. only further supplemented Strong's growing musical curiosity. The influences of Caribbean, go-go, orchestral, and jazz early on allowed him to develop a mature affinity and respect for a variety of music disciplines. After informally experimenting with both the organ and the drums, Strong began to more formally nourish his musical inclinations through participation in gifted and talented programs that offered symphonic band classes to junior high school students. Here he was introduced to the violin and a range of other instruments. Strong used his opportunity to visualize the overarching musical connections between all instruments. He auditioned and was accepted into the internationally lauded Duke Ellington School for the Performing Arts. Achieving higher education was also one of Strong's dreams, and he found his way on an international trip with Duke Ellington School and was recruited to North Carolina Central University, touring Europe with Dr. Wiggins, the director of jazz studies at NCCU at that time. He continued to advance his education by attending Northern Illinois University to study with saxophonist and professor Ron Carter, and he earned a Master of Jazz Performance Pedagogy degree. In the fall of 2011, you may know this in this area, Strong teamed with statistician Cicely Mitchell to create a nonprofit jazz presenting organization titled the Art of Cool Project. The nonprofit's mission was to expand the audience for jazz, initially through presentations in non-traditional spaces. Key project initiatives include an annual musical festival located in Durham and jazz summer camps for at-risk youth, the start of Cool. Recently, the Huffington Post coined the Art of Cool Music Festival as the Coachella of Jazz. let's see, I'm going to just jump forward a little bit. When not performing in the Raleigh-Durham area, Strong balances his nonprofit responsibilities, adjunct trumpet professorship, he teaches at NCCU in jazz studies, and traveling and performing. He books jazz scenes, jazz performances up and down the coast, all across the country, has headlined a Blue Note Jazz Festival, the Winter Jazz Fest, Blues Alley, and a host of other clubs, and performed with artists like Aretha Franklin, Clay Aiken, Branford Marsalis, Yazra, Soul Understated, Big Daddy Kane, and a number of others. And he is the Director of Arts, yes, Education at Durham Arts Council. That's like your newest hat, right?
That's right. Creative arts in public and private schools.
Creative
Right.
arts in public and private schools. I love these long titles they make, right?
Right.
Well, see, if you're listening and you're still on board with us right now after introducing that amazing panel, we have some fantastic voices all across the spectrum of arts education today. Kathleen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks again, panelists, for being here this afternoon. Y'all could each write your own memoir. This is awesome. You do such incredible things in the state and beyond. So we're so thankful you're here with us today. So our first couple questions are going to be focusing on teaching artist rosters. And the first question is, what types of support materials and work samples are most helpful to have in your application toolkit when applying to participate as a teaching artist on a roster? And feel free, whoever wants to just jump in.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So here at the Arts Council, we have a fairly large teaching artists roster. We have 51 teaching artists that are on our roster right now. And we just closed our applications for new teaching artists. So we've seen a lot of work samples and sorts of things. So obviously I would encourage teaching artists, really any artist, to make sure that their work samples speak really well to their chosen artistic discipline. And at least for our teaching artists, they're allowed to cross-list other artistic disciplines, which Al is nodding, so it seems like that's could be across both of our lists. So make sure that your work samples speak to every discipline that you're putting on your application. Our biggest, we require our teaching artists also to tie to NC Essential Standards. So I would review what sort of curriculum is going on in the schools that you're planning on working on because that just makes it like a lot easier for a teacher or a principal to like say, yes, we want to get artists in our schools, because we hear a lot of times from principals, well, gosh, you know, if we bring an artist in, that's taking away from the school day. And it sometimes takes a lot of convincing to say, well, no, this is part of the school day. We're enhancing the school day. So if you can kind of look at the curriculum, that helps. And then I'm going to also recommend like a sleeper one. This could be because I came from higher ed, but when you list your references, please let them know that you're listing them as your references. This should be like across, yeah, see, all y'all are nodding, right? Because this happens more than I want to admit, that we call a reference and they say either, gosh, I didn't know that I was a reference for that person. Or they say, of course, I can speak to their artistic discipline, but I've never seen that person teach. And so remember that if you are listing a reference for a teaching artist, your reference really needs to have seen you teach. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of times that they have to say NA on that reference form, which like you don't want any hangups at that stage of the process. Al, am I saying anything crazy?
No, I think you hit all of that right on the head, Sarah. Yeah, you reminded me of some instances recently surrounding the references situation. But just to piggyback off of what you said in terms of things that we look for from teaching artists, definitely artists being able to tie in their areas of specialty to the North Carolina standards is a high point for schools and other clients that look to supplement their curriculum, as we put it. Even speaking with like some vice principals and other administrators at schools this past school year, explaining to me why certain schools are maybe not getting back about utilizing the money that DPS sets aside. Why that may be the case is because in certain schools, every school is sort of run with its own culture, of course, but those schools are trying as much as possible to protect their instructional time. And so if we're placing an artist in front of them who, may have a really great program, but not a lot of track record in terms of how they're able to supplement a school's curriculum or complement a school's curriculum, then it's a tougher sell, if you will. So I definitely have seen that schools who are booking artists on a regular basis are leaning towards the cultural. We have a cultural category, and much like yourself, sir, I think we might have you beat by one artist. There's 52 artists on our roster. And actually I'm planning on hopefully adding more. So pray for me, because I want to, what I consider filling the gaps in what the Arts Council is able to offer in terms of creative artists in schools. But definitely the cultural arts categories are really big. Those are, of course, our African dancers, performers, those artists who are presenting music from the Latin American diaspora as well. Programs that, of course, speak to cultural trends, recent trends, such as like the hip hop category. Those artists are, really being highly sought after. And I find that, I like to add more Latin artists to our roster. And of course, more STEAM programs. And STEAM is, of course, I think what we all prefer over STEM, because we can't leave the arts out, but those artists who are really able to tie in, and I want to name, because I don't want to play favorites, but there's some artists who really do a great job at tying in math and music, and vice versa. They're just constantly booked. And I try to put little pings out to artists like, hey, if you have an idea that's similar to this, if you were to create that program, you would definitely get some hits in terms of your bookings. And so that's pretty much all we can do, and just try to support our artists as much as as much as we can. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I'm so glad, Al, you brought up STEAM, because I feel like that's something certainly I've been seeing with school partners is arts integration, for sure. So good point. And then I had to just put in there, make sure, let's say you're on a roster, make sure you document, try to document your experiences, because there's always going to be another application round, right? So I imagine on the rosters, Sarah, you just mentioned your application closed. So it's, even though it's like you're on there, is there some kind of sometimes required, like any update of materials or just check-ins? It doesn't end there once you're on the roster, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We want to support new and innovative programming. That's not saying we want to reinvent the wheel. We don't have our teaching artists reapply every year, but we do. We have a really kind of rigorous survey system that our teachers and principals and teaching artists fill out afterwards. So if we see some sort of disconnect there, then maybe we need to see some teaching materials again. And we do have the opportunity for all of our teaching artists to give us their new programming, which we really support, because I was a college professor, and it's real easy to keep that same old PowerPoint slide that you've been teaching from for 5 years, but that may not be what your students need. I didn't say it now, Lenora. I didn't call you out or anything. I was calling myself out. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
all.
no, mhm. I was going to ask Sarah, I mean, here at the Arts Council, of course, I just finished my first school year, but I came in a little behind the ball. I came in October. So of course the school year had already started and it's just been hitting the ground, running, trying to meet the budget, that was set before I came in. But how often does your application process come around? Ours is every other year.
So we allow for new teaching artists. Now I should say, I'm talking like I know my stuff, but I've only been here for a year and a half.
Okay.
So I'm kind of telling tales outside of school a little bit, but we allow new teaching artists to apply every year, or at least that's been our system so far. Some of that is because we are primarily a granting organization, and so we often will grant to nonprofits that are working with other educational partners, like I suspect some of these fantastic other panelists. And when we see that those partnerships are working really well, we often go to those grantees and say, hey, tell us about this artist, tell us about this teacher. Do you think they'd be a good fit for artists in schools? And that's often how we fill in our local artist roster. But, I'm also a newbie, so we'll see what we do going forward.
Sure. Right. feel
I
pretty
would
much
just
the
add
same
on
way.
to that, as a nonprofit organization, we're a multi-arts preschool as well as after-school program. We're always looking for teaching artists as well. And we don't keep a formal roster per se, but we definitely keep resumes on file and, a cover letter with links to your samples of work that you're doing, whether it's artistic work or watching you in action with students, is very helpful for us during that process.
I'm going to jump in here because we have a couple of hot questions on how to get on the artist rosters. Um, Irania Macias, if I'm massacring your name, I'm so sorry. How do you access those rosters? Do we apply through your websites? And Kelly Jolly, hey Kelly, she wants to know, I'm on the Tennessee Arts Commission teaching artist roster. Do you accept teaching artists from neighboring states? How does that work? So that can go right into our next question. And as you answer those two questions from our listening audience, our next panelist question overall is, why are teaching artist rosters helpful for schools and community partners? Go get them. Answer the questions.
Sarah, that's funny. Okay. So I'll jump on. I'll jump on this. Okay, how do you access those rosters? I believe my information is listed on the Durham Arts Council's website under CAPS is the program. That's typically how you can either call or email me as the CAPS director, astrong@durhamarts.org, and we'll be able to review your materials. As I said, we historically I've only taken on new artists every 2 years. However, if your program is unique and complements our roster, there's a possibility that your program could be added for next school year. And just to answer Kelly's question, right now, as far as I know, because I've gotten this question before, the Durham Arts Council isn't really set up to facilitate the hiring of teaching artists any further than, I would say, Granville County. We sort of deal with Durham County and south of us, Chapel Hill, Granville. So I guess Granville's maybe north as well, and sort of Wake County and United Arts deal with things in that direction going towards Fayetteville. So we kind of, have a mutual agreement in that respect. But, I think anything is possible. We do have artists that travel as far as Asheville and Charlotte. And sometimes it gets a little tricky when we're talking about budgeting and helping facilitate those artists and their, of course, their travel and accommodations. It gets a little pricey for most of our clients. But if you have family in the area, of course, when there's a will, there's a way. So I don't want to rule it completely out, but the sentiment that I've gotten from my higher ups is that that's typically something that the Durham Arts Council doesn't do.
Yeah, so we do have artists from outside of the state on our teaching artist roster. In order to kind of mitigate what Al is talking about, we require that they just set a price. And so that can be a non-starter if you're, coming from Tennessee and you really want to factor in exactly your mileage and that kind of stuff. That doesn't work for Cumberland County Schools, which is the school system that we serve, because of the way their vendor system and their background checks work. And so that's how we kind of, mitigate that, a little bit of that complicated. But you can find all of the information about ours on theartscouncil.com/artists in schools. And I'll also put my stuff in there, which also leads me into one of the reasons that I think teaching artists are really helpful for schools and community partners. I think that what you're hearing right now is like a bunch of people who have a lot of similar things to say about things, but they're saying it in different ways. And I love that about teaching artists. Nothing makes me happier than when we have a teaching artist that goes to a school and, like Al says, is a percussionist. Thanks, Kathleen. And, is like teaching math. And then I get to go to that school and see a kid who's like super stoked about math all of a sudden. And maybe that kid doesn't realize, but that teacher has been saying the same thing to them and has been trying to teach them that skill. But our teaching artists get to do it in such a fun and unique way, which is why I think it's really helpful to have that roster of teaching artists available to our schools.
And I have to say that the Teaching Artist Certificate Program at NCCU started because of this very question. I was one panelist for the CAPS roster one year, and I asked, what happens to the teaching artist applicants who don't make it on the roster? How do they get training? How do they find out and learn to know what they don't know? How do they get prepared? And they said, well, that's a great thought. That's a great idea, but we don't have the capacity to train the non-roster artists. We have professional development for our roster artists. So my bleeding heart started the inquiry on my campus for creating a way to train teaching artists, because schools really need a wide swath of talent. And there, like you said, Al, for indigenous groups of artists who do indigenous or folk arts. I didn't want to necessarily see someone doing African drumming who wasn't from the diaspora. Doesn't take anything away from someone learning that craft, but I know that there are African drummers that were in our community who needed work. So it's important to have a diverse group of faces and talent. And I think, I love all the things that you're sharing here. More feedback from any of the other panelists who haven't spoken about this topic.
I'll just hop in real fast back to the out of state. Similar, since I've taken on this role, my whole question has been to roster or not to roster on a statewide level. So we do find it really helpful, these regional rosters, because our mission here at the North Carolina Arts Council is to support North Carolina artists. And so we really are wanting to make sure, and it's hard to get to know all 100 counties. So that is making sure there's communication between, connecting with Al or connecting with Sarah and getting a sense of who are some of the artists on their rosters. And whenever I receive inquiries from teaching artists, I try to direct them to their local arts councils as well. That being said, we do have one program, I said to roster, not to roster, but we do have something we brought back called Cartwheels, which does have like a roster, but it's less residency based, but more like big performances that many of the artists or arts groups will provide. So we have 8 artists on that roster, and similar, we open it up every 3 years. It's a new application process. But we also want to be receptive to teaching artists from outside the state as well. So through some of our other grant programs, schools can certainly apply and bring in an out-of-state artist. So we do try to find a happy medium where we can, while still making sure here at the North Carolina Arts Council that we are supporting our North Carolina artists. But I think without a doubt, when I'm getting phone calls from schools or libraries or community centers, they find rosters very helpful, because oftentimes you might be working with someone who's very new to the arts, even with some of these organizations that are arts nonprofits. So rosters in some sense are very helpful in that these are artists that have been, gone through an application process, have been vetted by panelists who are very familiar with the work and expectations. So for people who may be new, especially who might not come from an arts background, but are trying to figure out a good artist to bring to their classroom for like an arts integration focus, or for a community event, I think they can certainly be very helpful.
Excellent. We have one more question. What training did you set up on the college level, Dr. Lenora? Was a question. I'll ask Cecilia to jump in here and help me with this one too. We set up a program for anyone, anywhere. You didn't have to be a student at our university. You could come in as a special student or just having a high school diploma, but 5 years or more experience as a teaching artist, and you want to get trained in the speak of how to prepare a portfolio, how to talk to school administrators, how to set up a residency with an arts and cultural center, a hospital. How do you as an artist prepare yourself to go and deliver engagement and connection with the arts and through the arts with your discipline, in your arts discipline? And because it's housed in a university college, performing arts college, we have the dance faculty and the theater faculty and the music faculty and the visual arts faculty to help us and assist us with things. But Cecilia is one of our instructors. Cecilia, if you want to speak to the difference with working with within a college teaching training program and your other teaching artist work.
Well, the interesting thing is, Lenore did not say in our bios that Lenore and I went to undergrad together. We were neighbors in the dorms, known each other forever, and all our little secrets. But Lenore saw something that I posted online on my Facebook page and then put in the chat, you can work for me, so after she saw my resume in terms of the type of teaching artist work that I had done or am involved with right now, I was a little hesitant because I had no idea what she was doing. And then when I read what she was doing, I was like, oh my gosh, she's like added this whole intellectual spin on it that is really kind of incredible. And so, when I've been working for you for almost a year now, and I've met some very incredible students, and I've had to really learn, Lenore's curriculum and then adapt it to what I know. I have a lot of experience teaching with all kinds of populations. And I was thinking about your initial question about the preparation for getting on rosters. One of the programs that I'm very involved with here in New York is called the SUCASA grant. And it's the largest granting program for senior citizens for all 5 boroughs of New York. And I was on their panel to make decisions for Brooklyn, because the Brooklyn Arts Council handles all the senior programs in New York City. And so does the Queens Arts Council, Staten Island. And so I got to sit on the panel and watch all kinds of applicants that were trying to be chosen for this type of teaching of senior citizens. And I hope I haven't digressed too much from Lenora's initial question, but
Perfect, it's perfect.
okay, because I was like, oh, I can't really answer that question. I don't live in North Carolina and I'm not sure about, rosters, but I've sat on a lot of panels, especially in the last few years. I've sat on Chamber of Music America panels. I've sat on Brooklyn Arts Council's panels, Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation panel, New Music panel. So I have seen an incredible amount of artists who are going after major grants or situations for touring. But for this Sukasa grant, because I bring it up, because the senior citizen community is a huge community, and it's one of our growing populations. I had worked for a couple of memory programs in the past, but never an adult club seniors, people who have retired and need activities during the day. The thing that I found interesting about the type of applications that we were looking at is that we already knew, you can already tell an artist who has a lot of playing experience, but not a lot of teaching experience by what they submit for this process. And a lot of the grant questions, what I'm finding, it's difficult for people to understand how to write, especially if there's a word count. And I always say to people, you need to reach out to someone who understands that language in terms of how to be specific with the word count about what you have to offer. Now I've noticed this last panel, they cut that out. They cut that word count out because they thought it was reducing their numbers of applicants applying for the Sukasa grant. And the other thing that I noticed is that artists were submitting only their performance visualizations in terms of what they do. And the senior population is a little bit different than education programs. I presently work with a population in the Ditmas Park section of Brooklyn, primarily West Indian senior citizens. I'm from the Midwest. My accent's pretty strong when I mix into that community. And, they were very hesitant to work, they would say, what's this Yankee all about? You know what I mean? So, I mean, and it took a year for me to have a sense of trust to teach them the various things that I wanted to teach them. But back to that application process, I would say to artists, if you're working in any population as a teaching artist, you should videotape as much as possible so that people can see what you have to offer. We saw a lot of terrific work, and we judged everything: dancer, visual arts, music. And often we would see these really in-depth multimedia, really incredible things in terms of the artistic development of it all, but was not feasible to this particular population because of a lot of things. One of them wanted to do murals, and they had to find facilities that would allow them to paint on the walls. Some of them had really in-depth thinking in terms of visual artists, multimedia stuff that wasn't really as feasible as it needed to be. And the question is always asked, is there a way for, visual artists or artists in particular to learn how to work into this, and to work in this particular population? And, the director of the program is, always says, we wish we had, the ability to teach artists how to work in the senior citizen, population. So yeah, I mean, I won't talk any further, but those examples of you working in the particular communities that you are trying to get work in is very, very important. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
That's great, Cecilia. I feel like you helped, your response helped answer kind of question number 3, which was going to be what's important, like once you're on a roster or once you're doing programming, what's important. And exactly, documentation is so key. Again, can speak from a panelist perspective. It's one thing to say you're going to do this program, but we love to see actual, whether it's work samples or recordings of the artist engaging in a class, or testimonials, even, providing some, having, when you're doing a workshop, if you could survey your participants, that's always great. Some of the feedback you can get, not only to maybe improve your craft, but also it may be very well received. And so include that information in a grant application and support materials. So I think my sneaky question behind question 3 was like, it's not over just because you've gotten that, you've gotten hired or you've gotten that partnership, but how you can make sure you're always documenting, and that can then support you in further growing and making new partnerships. So thank you. And I'm also glad you mentioned creative aging. I think we should definitely come back to it during our community partnerships. I'd love to know share a little bit more about that field as well. I think just for time, I think we can go ahead and skip question 3, which was kind of what to do, which is basically document artists out there and make sure you continue to document. But the next question is, we've been going on and on about rosters, and Sherilyn, you've already kind of hinted at this, but for organizations that don't have rosters, which are many arts nonprofits, how do you find your artists? How do you recruit teaching artists for your programs?
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things. I mean, definitely going to the Arts Council and finding who they have on their roster that might be available, because it's not a conflict, because most of our artists are doing after school programming or out of school hours for our artist programs. But when we also do the traditional routes of looking at Indeed and Facebook and Instagram, and we're looking to see those interactions. If we see videos of you interacting with students or interacting with seniors, it helps for us to get a feel for what your teaching style might be, and to make sure it fits our mission and vision. So we are not, as an art school, we are not looking to create the best ballet dancers or the most extravagant modern dance individuals or sculptors or whatever, but we really want folks to learn through the process. And so we are looking for artists who talk about the process and what it means to do different activities with students, and what are the outcomes going to be from that experience for them. So really looking at, a variety of sources, and we welcome resumes all the time. So if something feels closed off on one area, definitely send applications to local organizations, because we go through our files periodically to say, oh, it'd be great to teach XYZ type of class. Who do we know? And going to the universities and talking to the arts departments is another strong lead for us as well.
And that's the same here with us, with Hardiscope. We don't have a teaching artist roster, but we do have a really great partnership with the Pitt County Arts Council. And it's perfect because on their website, they have a link with, it has the artist directory. And then within that directory, you get to see which artists actually teach. And so we use that. We also use social media, and that can be a gift and a curse at the same time. We also partner with our local university here, East Carolina University, and that's always a great way to get in some new recruits, especially with students who have just graduated. So that's what we use, because we don't have a teaching artist roster as of yet.
And Deborah, I was so glad you mentioned that, because there obviously are teaching artists who are just starting out in the field. So that's great to see that you kind of see this internship or just kind of mentorship component as well for some of your programs.
Great. We have a couple of questions. Sherilyn, what area is Arts Together based in Raleigh? Or yes, Arts Together is based in Raleigh.
Yes, we're based in Raleigh.
Great. And someone asked about Deborah Shepard, talking more about her work in Hardiscope.
So Horoscope basically, so there are a number of arts organizations in Greenville and in Pitt County, amazing organizations. What I wanted to do with our organization was focus on the communities that may not have access to the arts. I'll take that back. Everyone has access to arts. It's available. But some programs, there are barriers. So, you know, transportation, it might not be cost efficient for some families. And so the biggest thing that I wanted to make sure that we focused on were those communities who have a lot of barriers to art. We believe that art should be accessible and affordable to everyone. And while we understand that certain organizations have to charge a fee in order for them to function, which we totally understand and support, for me, it was worth the sacrifice to say, hey, if we're able to offer free arts programming, then let's do that. And so right now we don't have a set brick and mortar, but what we do have, we have been able to partner with our local Parks and Rec department within the city. And so we are able to house our programs within those communities that we serve. So we go right into those underserved communities. And the reason why we do that is because if there are students or families who aren't able to drive their kids to the different arts program, they can walk to us. And with our programs on weekends, we provide free lunch, free breakfast, just to make sure that those kids not only have a safe space to go to for some time, but we also make sure that they're fed so that they can be able to think and create, because it's hard to do that on an empty stomach. And so we just wanted to make sure that we go right into those communities that are impacted the most by trauma. We know that trauma does not discriminate. So we know that everyone's impacted by trauma, but we do know that with those underserved communities, they don't always have the access to those tools to deal with trauma. And since art has just been such a creative way to deal with trauma, it's like, so why not make art free and accessible to everyone, especially if it creates a path to healing? So we do that with our programs. We do teaching projects. We go into the schools. We also have a mural initiative. So basically, we go around in these underserved communities and put up murals to liven up these communities, because whenever there are mural projects that go up in Greenville, West Greenville and other underserved communities are never looked at for whatever reason. And for me, I'm like, we can complain about it or do something about it. So we just went after grants, partnered with different organizations to get these murals up in these communities. So we basically just found an area that was underserved and say, hey, let's bring art to them without having to stress out all the other organizations who already have their communities that they serve.
It's kind of like Arts on Wheels.
Yes, basically, yes. And we love being mobile.
I love that. I love that. I think it's so important to be able to have a wide variety of the way to think about where you would want to partner, what kind of organization to partner with. When I lived in New York and worked at hospital audiences for a small amount of time, based on Cecilia's recommendation, I was able to see, do I like that community of people to serve? Or when I worked with in K through 12 schools, or when I worked for young audiences, or a music program like Carnegie Hall's Link Up. When you're in different environments, you get to think about yourself as a teaching artist and how you want to serve. Do you want to serve in a senior community? Do you want to serve in an autistic community? Do you want to serve with adults, or do you want to serve with youth? And that's important. It's just like your personality. It's understanding who you are as a person and how you best serve and express your work. I think, part of the next question helps us to look at that. We talked about what makes for how the organizations find their teaching artists, what kinds of the importance of teaching artists rosters and programs. But can we talk about, panelists, a little bit about what kind of skills you're looking for in a teaching artist? I'm going to kind of marry two questions together here, Kathleen. What kind of skills are you looking for in teaching artists? And can you provide examples of some of the partnerships, like if you had to take one or two partnerships you had, and kind of weave those answers together, please? Thank you.
Well, I'll jump in. For us, I think you were speaking earlier about folks who are early in their career. We love folks who are early in their career, who are looking for an opportunity to present themselves and to work with others. So experience, if you've had an internship, teaching and stuff like that is a starting point for us, where you've been out a little bit, but we also provide those internship opportunities. We're looking for folks who are willing to learn as they teach. So there are certain styles of, the mentality that we're looking for, folks who are willing to work in a diverse community. And, Arts Together, we are located in downtown Raleigh, and our vision sometimes does not align with who you might see in our dance studios. And so being able to align that and help us to align that with recruiting students into our program and going out into community as well is a big part of that. I love what Deborah is doing in her community, and similar to that, we do both. We have our brick and mortar space where we have dance floors and art spaces and those type of things, but we also go out into community. Kathleen was mentioning earlier our Project Sway or Youth Sway program. And that program, SWAY, is an acronym for Storytelling, Wellness, Art, and You. And that is in partnership with Community in Schools and the Raleigh Housing Authority. And so we go into neighborhoods and, into the community, and the students help us create the project. So we have a Youth Sway program, and we're about to launch our Senior Sway program with residents of one of the Carriage House, which is located right near our building. It's a 55 plus Raleigh Housing Authority community. And it really is going in, asking them what they want to do and how would they like to be involved, and what are some of the themes and things that they want to talk about, dance it out, draw it out, paint it out, to express those feelings and emotions. So those are one of the key partnerships that we have going on right now. Another one that I love that we're doing is with a school called Dynamic Opportunities. And it's a school for the differently abled, and it's for middle school and high school students. And those students said, we want to learn how to do hip hop. We're like, okay, we're going to send a hip hop artist in to teach you. And so the hip hop artists and the modern dance artists are going into the schools and helping them to learn. One of the great outcomes of that program this last year, we have a company, a Rainbow Dance Company, which is our in-house repertory dance company. They incorporated the students from Dynamic Opportunities, and they performed on a stage 3 nights, 3 performances for a live audience, and they stole the show. So being able to see students with different abilities, different age groups from a variety of different communities is important to what we're doing.
And if I could just piggyback off that, I think is absolutely amazing. Glad to know that you're in Raleigh, so have to connect. Here, I know that one of the biggest things we look for with our teachers is not just your experience in teaching, but because we work with underserved children, one of the biggest things that we want to know is, do you have experience working with underserved populations? Because, for example, our first year we did our arts program, our Saturday workshops. We hired someone. It was through a partnership with the Greenville Museum of Art. So they had a teacher there, and they're like, hey, we can bring her on and she can, help you all. Perfect. She's a teacher. She has the experience, but not thinking, oh God, does she have experience working with our population? And total transparency, my kids gave her a run for her money. So, and bless her heart, she tried so hard to connect with the kids, and they loved her, but it was just so easy for them to run over her. And so our next school year, we had a better way of gauging any instructors who were able to come in. And that was important because for me, I want our kids to have the same opportunities as the kids who parents pay $100 a week, you know, for programming. And so for me, that means that our classes need to have structure. The kids need to know we have expectations, and we need an instructor in there who can connect with them, build that relationship with them, but also not be afraid to set that standard with them. So that was, you know, that's just a truth moment with us. And then one of our partnerships that I feel like has been really successful is we have a program called Matters of the Heart, with emphasis with art and heart, with the Pitt Academy School. And Pitt Academy School here is an alternative school, basically. So the kids who get kicked out of the public schools go to Pitt Academy in hopes that they will be rehabilitated and be able to go back into the public school systems. And so we do a program there where we provide arts programs with the kids, and it helps them deal with those social emotional skills, helps them build their self-esteem, because a lot of times those are the issues that they have that causes the trouble when they're in school. And so one of our successes that we had this year, which was our first year launching it, we had 2 students who were able to go back into the public school system after working with us for about 9 months. And so we were super excited about that. And then also our Heart of the City program, which is basically an arts festival that we do right in the middle of what most people would say the hood. We literally found like a vacant lot, and we just partnered with the city of Greenville, Greenville Parks and Rec, the Pitt County Arts Council at Emerge here. And I'm like, hey, you know, we don't always have to go, you know, uptown for arts festivals. Let's just go right in the middle of the community. We found a vacant lot. We set up vendors. We had different artists come in. So when families come, they're just walking from home, and they'll come to the lot. They get to participate in different art activities. We also invite different community organizations who provide resources for the different families to come and set up. And so it's just a big old arts festival in the middle of the community. And this year we just had our 3rd annual one, and we've grown in numbers every year. I want to say this year we did over 300 attendees. And so this was not just people from the neighborhood. This was also people from all other parts of Pitt County, because we get to tell them, hey, I know you might be scared to drive through these neighborhoods, but it's safe here. And so they come and just have a great time mingling with everyone. And so it's just been a huge success. So it's just taking that leap of faith, and it's been amazing.
Maybe on that note, kind of start, not to get too off the question, but Deborah and Cherilyn, like, how do you, and Cecilia, you know, all of our panelists, like, how do you, you know, here you are coming from an arts perspective, how do you get buy-in maybe from, you know, other community organizations or organizations that might not be, let's say, a quote unquote arts background, right? So like, just to, how do you, I think, you know, you already kind of want to address it, is like just listening, and what are the actual, you know, what is actually would be well received, but how do you know, how do you kind of establish those partnerships and then just keep them going, like for sustainability? What are some key skills?
Yeah, that's important. And Deborah hit on it so beautifully. Again, it is working at the speed of trust. I mean, you can't just go in and think you can bring your program to a community and think it's going to go well. It's really finding out who are the leaders in the community, who are those folks who other people listen to and connect with, and asking them to help you create something or help get the people in the door. So you can at least start having those conversations and learn what the needs are and how do you pull it together in collaboration. It's not doing to or doing for, but it's really doing with. How do we collaborate with either another community group that's already in place or with an organization that's already in place, and find out what their needs are and build our programming around that. For example, Community in Schools, they're providing homework help and tutoring services. And they were like, we would love to get our kids out of these chairs sometimes just to move around and get the wiggles out. And we're like, okay, we can help get the wiggles out, and dance it out and talk about a theme or whatever that may be going on in the community. So finding out and really trying to tie in to what's happening there. One of our artists, who is a St. Aug grad. He's an amazing artist and he does micrography, and that is taking small words and doing photographs and pictures and allowing the students to do that with positive words and affirmation statements. And to see those kids create their own face out of words that mean something to them and let them walk away with that and take that home is very powerful, and so really trying to create opportunities to build trust, to collaborate. And I think the other thing is being consistent. Once you start something, make sure you can follow through. If it's an 8-week program, make sure you stay and go every 8, for that full 8 weeks. If it's full year, be there, because that's what builds the trust. And as the kids get to know the teaching artists better, they come to expect it, and they show up in amazing ways, as they get to know and trust the teachers, and the teachers can trust them as well.
Yeah, it's just doing the work. People say all the time, people never support us. And I'm like, look, I can present a great idea to people all day, but people need to see action. So I always tell people, just start working, just start working. And then, if they love what they see, they're going to gravitate to you. And then also going into these communities, when we first started, we were knocking on doors and we were getting asked, how do we know you're not just going to set up and do something here and then leave? Because a lot of these communities deal with abandonment issues. And so for them, it was like, don't come to our door telling us what you're doing, just do it. And if we like it and you stay, then we'll support. So it was a humbling experience. So it was like, these people don't want to hear me talk or anything. They just want to see us work. And so it's kind of like the Field of Dreams. If you build it, they'll come. I hope I said that right. So basically that's kind of what it was. People love the energy, they're going to gravitate to it. So a lot of times it didn't take much talking at all. The buy-in came from people just seeing the work.
I love that. You all are giving us such good nibbles to chew on, and really giving wide an opportunity for teaching artists to see what it on its feet, the work on its feet, the work having a different context, having a different population that's served, but all of you, the passion is coming through, and it's really inspiring me in an academic setting where the teaching artist world is very foreign. Everything is, oh, it's not a degree, it's not an arts education teacher. What is a teaching artist? So there are still places in our society, in our communities, that don't understand what teaching artists do and who we are. We are a separate niche, a part of ourselves that you can be a teacher. Many of us have been classroom teachers, but choose instead to work in what some people think of as an alternative setting. I think it's the primary setting, actually, because we can touch such a varied amount of people. As we're kind of winding down to some final questions and comments, Kathleen, and help me here if this next one is, we continue to navigate the impact of the pandemic on the arts programming in our state, or in your state too, Cecilia. Because I see that you reach across the aisle in being a panelist in your work. As we continue to navigate the impact of the pandemic on the arts programming in your area, what challenges or new opportunities have come up, have you encountered? For example, re-engaging audiences, how did you do it? Creating schools' capacity for arts programming. Many schools were deciding not to have teaching artists at all, or many of them use teaching artists in a different way. How did you shift and pivot to do that?
Well, that's a very interesting question. One of the organizations that I work for is a nonprofit organization called Marquee Studios. They have a teaching roster of artists, and they had their money in place and had started programming when the city of New York shut down. And at that time, I wasn't teaching for them, but they called me and said, would you like to teach some classes online during COVID? And I was like, I was already teaching online. I worked for a human service not-for-profit organization called AHRC, which services individuals who have, well, all the politically correct words been changing up lately. Now they're called intellectual disabilities, people with intellectual disabilities. I had been, well, let me just say, I had been teaching in residential homes for group homes. And the nurse that ran my department said to me, if you figure out how to teach all your classes online, I'll hire you at the same rate of pay that we teach you in person, which I had no idea what I was doing and how to set that up. Took me about 2 months to set that up with various houses that had maybe 6 or 7 individuals living there. They hated it at first, but as the pandemic grew on, they loved it because I was the only activity happening during the course of the week. So when Marquee Studios called me, I said, hey, I'm already set up like that. But it was quite the challenge to figure out how I was going to adapt what I did for Marquee Studios. And I should say Marquee Studios, this particular contract deals at a school on Staten Island. PS 37R is a school specifically for kids on the spectrum. And some of the kids stayed home. Some of the kids were in classrooms. I mean, I don't know what went on in North Carolina, but if a classroom broke out, it got to the point where if a classroom broke out with COVID, the whole classroom had to stay home. And so they had figured out how to get their education through online services, everything. It was quite the challenge, but it worked for some odd reason. We would open up in different classrooms. They had about 5 or 6 of us who were teaching all day online. Now, when school opened again, they opened at a very high rate of COVID in New York, and I opt not to go in because the school that at PS 37R, they had a high amount of COVID going on there. In my classes for AHRC, they had continued online and they continue online right now. And because the individuals I deal with are so fragile, they prefer that I stay online. So I had to do some real adapting in terms of how I was going to do my lesson. You can't see it, but I have a piano, MIDI keyboard set up here. I can play. I have a very powerful mic. Yeah, I mean, I had figured out how to make a living playing online for a few organizations, and this worked quite great.
What I noticed this past school year was a big concern for one of our clients, Durham Public Schools, was test scores, and namely with their ESL students, if you will. So Durham Public Schools created what they call the EL Prep Academy, which is, I guess, English Language Prep Academy, because I think what they found was that their Spanish-speaking students were testing lower, post-COVID. And they utilized the Durham Arts Council's CAPS roster as a way to, again, complement their curriculum. They actually did this academy on Saturdays, and I would send in artists, primarily Spanish-speaking artists, to combine their art with the curriculum as a way to sort of break up the the activities for that day for the students. So much of this, I think, comes down to what students I think are really in need of. For instance, I mean, when we started Start of Cool, which is my jazz education program, we were actually on Durham Arts Council's roster for several years before. Now I'm on the other side of the fence from the administrative perspective. But our claim to fame was being able to teach all levels of music students or jazz students how to play a jazz show in a week. And so we would get all types of students, of course, beginners, namely beginners would be a really great appeal, I think, for parents. We had a number of autistic kids who would also enroll in the camp, and just to see those kids go from, learning how to assemble a saxophone to being able to play a blues scale at the end of that week, and actually perform at a concert, we find that they would get, the most house out of even some of our highest flyers in those situations. So redirecting this back to the post-COVID conversation, I think that the arts, being strategically placed in our schools in certain curriculums is a high desire for our schools and our teachers. Namely, what I've been pushing artists to do, and I'll be upfront about it, is to raise their rates, because I mean, I shouldn't say strategically, but historically, of course, our teaching artists they're probably not paid nearly as much as they should be. With that said, rates for, if I were to speak to jazz musicians, I've been watching a lot of jazz documentaries lately, so forgive me, but rates being frozen for jazz musicians for the past 50 years has been one of my personal battles, if you will, with the system to do my part to sort of eradicate that. But from a teaching artist perspective, I definitely don't want to see that translate into our sphere, if you will. So I've been encouraging them to, hey, if a client has a larger budget than usual, I'm going to do my best to get you paid more, especially post-COVID. And it's just, it's been working out. There's some instances where payment is delayed. And I think that for teaching artists, it's important, if they don't know already, that we should be looking at this as just one avenue of income. And it's important for them to tie into as many arts councils around the state as possible to, if this is going to be a primary source of income, to piece it all together. And being a person who was fresh out of jazz school, if you will, wanting to be a professional artist, professional musician, that's a big part, I think, of, I can speak for Lenore and maybe Cecilia as well, of how we pieced it together early on, was definitely taking opportunities as they come and making a living out of it. So from the teaching artist sphere, it's, really the same thing. And hopefully our artists will get to a point where they've designed program or a program that really brings home the bacon, for lack of a better term, so that they can sort of pare back and enjoy the fruits of their labor, if you will. And I think it was Deborah who mentioned wanting to work with younger artists. I think if I could just circle back around to that briefly, in that Start of Cool program, I would, as much as possible, employ current students and new graduates from our North Carolina Central Jazz Studies program to be our camp counselors and our instructors, so that they get that, I think, that experienced early on. It's the same thing that was passed down to me from older musicians when I was in college as well. And I think it's a cycle, right? And one that we, as I guess the ones who were maybe more seasoned, if you will, are charged with helping improve and instilling those values into the next generation to, of course, further the cause even more. And especially post-pandemic, of course, there's so many challenges that if we all just tackle one or two on our own, I think we'll be in great shape in the next 2, 3, 5 years, if you will.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for everything that you all have been sharing today. It's been inspiring for me to hear what you all are up to and what's going on and what's pressing. We are looking at a new landscape where we need to think about how much it costs to do the work we do, how much we want and what we want going forward in our field, and how to really support and help people. I hope that you will share. This is the live on YouTube, and I hope that you will share it from either of our pages, North Carolina Arts Council or North Carolina Central University's Teaching Artist Certificate Program page. I want to thank North Carolina Arts Council for the support they give us. We are able to have artists like Cecilia Smith because of the support you give us. I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to throw information about our certificate program in the chat, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kathleen, and so we can kind of head on out because we have about 11 minutes left to this time, and if anybody else wants to have any parting comments.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Lenora. And thank you again, panelists. I really enjoyed this afternoon and just getting to learn a lot. Participants here, and when we also upload this webinar to various websites, feel free to always reach out. I'm Kathleen Collier at the North Carolina Arts Council, and I can always direct you and make sure you get connected with any of our panelists today. I also just wanted to give a quick shout out. We do have a grant called the Artist Support Grant, and the North Carolina Arts Council gives funding out to local arts councils all 100 counties in the state. And so typically those artist support grants, it's open to individual artists who are based in North Carolina, can certainly apply. The application typically opens in the summer through fall. It just kind of varies by your county and region, because again, we work very closely with the local arts councils to facilitate this grant program. But the focus is all on professional development. So going back to finding funding for documenting your work samples, if there's a new project you really want to be working on, that's really the goal of this grant, is to help artists in their career. So again, I'll put a link in the chat, but also feel free to just kind of Google North Carolina Arts Council Artist Support Grant, and there's more information as well as who you should contact on your county level to learn more about the application timeline. And definitely contact on your county level, because each county has a different application deadline, but it is open to individual artists who are based in North Carolina. But otherwise, does anybody else have any other questions or final comments? This was great. And again, we'll make sure a webinar is being recorded and shared. But thank you all so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Yeah, Al.
Sorry, just one final comment. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. I subscribed, I think it was 17 subscribers. Just inviting everybody. Want to piggyback off Lenore, subscribe. Now it's 18, I think, with my subscription. It's free. It's free to do. It doesn't hurt you. Just subscribe, okay?
Thank you, Al.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I think unless there's anything else to say, I think we can we'll end it here.
Well, what I do want to also throw in there is that we're still accepting applications for our fall cohort of Teaching Artist Certificate students. we're able to give some support and stipends for the activities that you do. And we're able to introduce you to a lot of different ways that you prepare yourself and learn. We've had a veteran teaching artist and new people to the field come through our program. Since we do have a couple of minutes, I want to share, I hope I can share this video of one of our teaching artists that came through our program. I want to share my screen and share this with you because I think it's, Angel Dozier, turned her teaching artist certificate experience into a community leadership program at Hayti and in the city of Durham. And she taught us a different way to think about what a teaching artist is. Because when she came in, she didn't come in as a painter, a dancer, a poet, or anything. She said, my artistry is in connecting people. And I said, okay, keep talking. And she says, well, I do these events called Be Connected in Durham. And, there's an art in creating context for people to engage with each other, just like you do in the arts. And I said, okay. And the city of Durham gave her a grant to create a program to teach other community leaders. So I like to share this video with you. Let's see if I can get it on here. Can you see my screen? Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it well.
My name is Angel Isette Dozier, and I'm a non-traditional graduate of North Carolina Central University. I have been referred to as a cultural alchemist because of my curatorial style. I tend to plan events and curate works that serve as an education, but they also combine all the arts into one thing that I call an artistic prescription. It's something that I started working on as a teaching artist certificate student here at North Carolina Central University, in which I use various parts of the art to prescribe something that will help people get through situations in a more personal way. And that tends to have an impact on community. I'm driven to be involved in the communities that I serve because of my own personal experiences living in a world where I didn't always feel like I belong. And so I have designed that as my way of curating events and programming, because it's important for us to use the arts to engage the people who really need to be our target audience. The first time I met Dr. Lenora Helm Hammonds, I was a jazz curator at BU Cafe. And I had worked with Lenora on a couple of events just throughout the community and throughout my years. And so when I saw Lenora share something about a teaching artist certificate program that she had created, I was curious because she was a teaching artist. And she was like, I'll talk to you, I can give you a call, share about what teaching artistry is, and that it was important. Teaching artistry is about educating people as you create. My background is science, and I have this other part of me that's very much the arts. I did not go to school to be a teacher. I went to school to be a doctor, and I ended up graduating with a degree in pre-physical therapy. So I had no business in the classroom in any of those ways. But that's just it. It was the unique experiences, the combination of those experiences that brought me into that space and allowed me to combine those elements and also model that for my students in the way that they would reflect that back to me. North Carolina Central gave me that opportunity to really understand what it meant to be my complete self. To soar means to fulfill your best version of excellence, which is why I love being associated with the Eagle. My mother got her master's degree from here. My sister got her degree. My nephew got his degree. My professors were really encouraging. I felt like I was home.
Thank you for watching.
That's awesome. I had no idea that Angel came through the program, or if I did, it was stored far back. But she's a great community leader here in Durham. So happy to hear.
Yeah, she really is. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So please spread the word about the program. We want to draw a diverse group of young artists or emerging artists to make sure that they have the training they need to go out in our state and um, enrich our communities. I'm really proud that one of our new um, partners is the Orange County Department of Aging. Am I saying that right? Samantha Pell. And when our teaching artist certificate students get to the end of the program, they have to design a residency with one of our partners. And we watch them do all the things we said that we taught them how to do. And some of the partners reach out to us or we find them. So, and then we kind of place them. So we want to be that pipeline of getting trained and then into the field through a partner. So like you help us parent that teaching artist and before we put them out in the field. So would love your energy and spreading the word about it. And yes, join the YouTube channel. Thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.